Awesome.
Well, my name is Melissa Sargent, and I am currently a state representative in the 48th Assembly District, and I am really honored to be running to be the next state senator in the 16th Senate District here in the state of Wisconsin. It is clear to me that right now in Wisconsin, we need people who are unapologetically progressive, that have a real relationships with people in the community, a track record of getting things done, a sense of compassion, as well as real pragmatism. And I believe that I bring that to this campaign. I'm excited about my team and what it is that we're putting forward. Certainly there is no track record or playbook by which campaigning with COVID exists. So the beautiful campaign plan that we had written in January, it's on a shelf, which is the worst place for any plan to be sitting. But I think this is the one time when it's important to be nimble and be responsive to the ever-changing reality of the world around us.
Definitely. It's certainly interesting times. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Peter German, he, him, his. I'm co-chair of the Dane County chapter. I'm not sure if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Aisha Mo, she, her, hers, and I am a member of the Dane County OWR Steering Committee.
Awesome.
Nice to see both of you today.
Thank you. Awesome. So I will launch right in with the questions here. Let me quick bring this up. All right. So do you support publicly funded elections? Why or why not?
Absolutely. So I believe that publicly funded elections ensure a fair representation and responsive government at all levels, and it's a fundamental cornerstone to our democracy. I think it's really important that voters elect their elected officials as opposed to elected officials choosing who their voters are. And we have a real problem right now with money from outside groups and rich and wealthy people impacting our electoral process here in the state of Wisconsin, and in fact across the nation. So I have worked really hard to make sure that we have equal opportunity for people to run for office, and believe that publicly funded campaigns is the next important step that we take.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Aisha, if you'd like to take the next question.
All right. Do you favor extending the time frame to vote at the polls during elections to a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the election date?
So absolutely. In fact, we had a really devastating decision made by the circuit court recently in Wisconsin that is closing the door on people being able to early vote in this election. And in the election before us in April, we saw some benefits from that, especially with this pandemic. Making sure that people have the ability to vote is a cornerstone of our democracy. Every person, in my opinion, should have the right and the ability to vote. And when we are creating scenarios where it's hard to get to the polls, or polls have very limited hours, or there's big long lines, that's not healthy for our democratic process. And certainly when the city of Madison and Milwaukee have the same number of polling places and restrictions as a community of 500 people, there is not equity there. And I think we even saw that in the April elections with Milwaukee and Madison on election day. You know, I'm going a little bit farther than extending the time frame, but to me, voting and voting access is crucial, and anything that is standing in the way from people being able to do that is egregious.
Thank you.
And sort of sticking with the theme of elections, obviously Wisconsin's been very divided by gerrymandering, since the 2010s, especially the assembly. So what model or plan would you prefer for redistricting?
So there are a few different nonpartisan redistricting plans that I believe we should be looking at in the state of Wisconsin. We don't have to look too far to our west, to Iowa, and see how it is that they do their redistricting in their state. Quite frankly, getting the politicians out of it and having a group of people that represent the community at the forefront is vital. And when I was a freshman in the assembly, that was our first bill that the freshman class put out together. And every session since then, the incoming Democratic freshmen have introduced that bill as their class bill. So we're building a scenario where more and more people in the legislature are signing on to that policy. And I believe there are 2 different bills that are currently in the legislature right now that will certainly die because we're unlikely to go back into session. But there are a number of ways around it. And here in Dane County, even our Dane County board has committed to doing nonpartisan redistricting for our county board districts. And I think that's a great model to be looking at as well. Local government, right?
Hell yeah.
What are your top 3 legislative priorities? What will you do to move them through the legislature?
So I have really created 3 buckets when I talk about my campaign and my legislative priorities. One of them is investing in and lifting up families, the people that call Wisconsin home. And to me, that includes affordable housing, minimum wage, building an economy that works for everyone as opposed to the rich and the wealthy, and restoring workers' rights in the state of Wisconsin. Those are very important issues to me. I also believe it's very important that we have leadership that works on moving Wisconsin forward. And I am dedicated and have a track record of doing that. And that would be addressing the egregious racial disparities in Wisconsin. That is not something that I just started talking about. I've been talking about it for decades. Securing affordable and quality healthcare for everyone in Wisconsin. Healthcare to me is a human right. Improving public transit and infrastructure in the state of Wisconsin. And making sure that it's multimodal is very important to me, and prioritizing public health and safety. I think that policymaking should be done with a lens of public health and safety. And lastly, I believe that we need to keep Wisconsin moving forward and planting the seeds for tomorrow. And when I talk about that, the issue areas that I put in that bucket are protecting our natural resources, our air and our water and our land, investing on public education at all levels, whether it's before kids go into our public K-12 schools or our K-12 schools, as well as colleges and universities, tech schools, and advanced learning opportunities for people. Additionally, supporting innovation and entrepreneurship, supporting local businesses. That's really how it is that we grow our economies, allowing people to have that ability to dream and build jobs for themselves, their families, and their neighbors. And then finally, legalizing cannabis for recreational as well as medicinal purposes. A number of those different policies that I just talked about in those 3 different areas are policies that I have been the lead author on those pieces of legislation. And it's been really exciting to see them when I first put them out as kind of controversial. And now we're seeing them as everyday issues that even our presidential candidates are talking about. And, really that comes from listening to the people of the state of Wisconsin, prioritizing what the people of Wisconsin are asking for, and being bold and believing them, and bringing their voices into the policymaking process. So lifting up what it is that Wisconsin really cares about.
Thank you very much.
I realize we have a short period of time and I feel like I've got some robust answers. So I hope I'm not talking too quickly for you guys.
Oh yeah, no, we have the next time frame is gonna be like 50 minutes, so you're definitely good.
Okay.
And so the emergence of this pandemic, a lot of things have been changing very rapidly, but would you support state level economic hardship payment? Would you support such direct payments to residents? And what would you want to be in that kind of a bill if one were to pass?
Absolutely. So I'm going to add a little bit to the answer that I sent you guys. And that is that I realize that being in the legislature means that I'm one voice and 132 people in the Capitol building. And it's really important to be pragmatic as well as progressive and bold. And this is where having those relationships with people really matters, because there are going to be people out there that are going to be uncomfortable with having these conversations. But one of the things that I have learned in my life is when I am uncomfortable, but people around me are saying this is what we should do, this is the right thing to do, we all actually grow and benefit from embracing that discomfort. And I believe that a lot of what we're experiencing right now with COVID, as well as with our Black Lives Matter movement, are going to need us to step into and breathe that discomfort. So that said, I did come up with 5 different ideas, components to a plan, but I do realize that, you know, I am not running to be the governor of the state of Wisconsin. I am running to be a member of the legislature, and that means also being willing to give and take. So I do support direct payments to residents, and I believe that we need to invest in the people of our state as opposed to special interests and corporations. For example, at the federal government giving so much money to airlines as opposed to Main Street businesses and to, you know, people who are still continuing to struggle, as opposed to giving money. You know, here in Wisconsin, our Republican colleagues are not helping to fix our antiquated UI programs that we have been talking about being broken for so long, and we still have people who have been filing for their payments that have not received them. So there is certainly a lot of work that we can do and that we need to do on that front. But number one, the payment should go directly to the people of Wisconsin, including those people that are on the front lines. The ones that their lives are in the most jeopardy because of what it is that they're doing. Our daycare workers, our food service workers, the people that are taking care of our neighborhoods and our infrastructure. And so many of those people are already not paid enough for the jobs that they're doing, even before COVID hit. And now we are just expecting that everything is going to work well. And frankly, we're seeing disproportionate effects of COVID on those people's health and the impacts on their families. Secondly, I believe very much that the amount needs to be a sufficient amount, a living wage, a living amount. It's not really a wage, but amount that will allow people to live their lives without worry of losing their home, without a worry of not being able to purchase their medicine or to put shoes on their kids or to have food in their bellies. And I have so many people that have been reaching out to my office that right now they own their own home and they're not eligible for any sort of support for their mortgage. So, you know, we do have some CARES Act money that has been available to renters and to landlords. And that is too slow going out to those renters and too fast going out to the landlords. But people are having their homes foreclosed on because we haven't closed that gap. So we need to be really serious about what a reasonable amount of money is and make sure that it's going into the hands of the people that absolutely need it. Additionally, I believe very much that we need more assistance and funds going to people that are below the poverty line, the people that were already hurting even before COVID hit, because they are suffering even more every single day. And, you know, we're seeing people that were originally living and navigating life homeless, now not being in shelters because COVID is spreading rapidly through shelters, right? So we do not have the adequate services for people to live a humane life. In many ways. So we need to prioritize those people that are the most vulnerable in our communities. Additionally, we need oversight, accountability, transparency, shining that sunlight. A lot of that federal money went to businesses with the PPP program, and we have no idea what those businesses did with the money. We're not going to be hold them accountable. It was supposed to be a paycheck protection program. And quite frankly, I think it was lining the pockets of our rich and wealthy. So I would hate for that to happen in Wisconsin if we're going to be investing our state dollars in that. Additionally, it needs to happen more than once. A one-time payment is not sufficient when we're dealing with a pandemic that, quite frankly, we don't know when it is that we're going to be out of this. It could be 6 months, it could be 18 months, it could be even longer. And quite frankly, I know, and I am just as hungry as everyone else to get our economy back and to support our small businesses. Many of the businesses in my district are really suffering. But I also know that no business is going to be prosperous or successful if they do not have a healthy workforce. If their employees are not safe and healthy, we're not going to be able to move forward. People are desperate to have their kids go back to school. Well, guess what? We can't just say go back to school when it's not healthy for our teachers and for our kids. That's how this continues to spread. That's why we are here right now. Wisconsin was a leader in many of the actions that we took early on with COVID, and now we're one of the worst. And, you know, we're seeing some really drastic situations here in the state of Wisconsin. Elderly people who are afraid they're never going to see their family again, that desperately want to hug their children and their grandchildren. And those are some of the hardest calls that I have had to encounter as a state representative and also as a Senate candidate as I'm reaching out to people. We need to be compassionate in how it is that we're making these decisions and make sure that we're trusting the people that are here in Wisconsin.
How will you guarantee housing to citizens? How will you deal with the financial situation of those facing eviction because of the pandemic? And what specific solutions do you propose?
So certainly we're privileged to be living here in Dane County, where the Dane County Board authorized, I believe, $10 million to go to housing assistance to renters. And I know that that money is not even going to be enough. And many counties haven't even taken those steps. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that doesn't affect people who own their homes, who are on limited budgets, whose their investments have gone down, or they're not able to go back to work, or they're afraid to go back to work. So we need to make sure, and this is even pre-COVID, housing is a human right. We need to make sure that affordable housing is something that is accessible to everyone across the state of Wisconsin, COVID or not. Right now with COVID, I very much believe that we need to be ceasing all evictions and foreclosures until this pandemic is over. Housing, as I said over and over again during this interview, is a human right. And if people don't have a safe place to sleep at night, that is not how we should be defining ourselves as a community. It's absolutely stomach churning to think that there are people out, today it's over 90 degrees without a safe place to be. Our family shelters are full, and there are mothers and babies on the streets all over the state of Wisconsin because we don't have adequate resources for them. I also believe very much, again, this is pre-COVID, but if people actually made a living wage, housing would be more affordable, right? So I put in, I want to touch on with this answer that I very much believe that every Wisconsin worker should be paid a living wage. And I am proud to be the lead author on the $15 in a union bill here in the state of Wisconsin, and have been standing on the front lines with our fast food workers and our nurses and frontline service people for many years, advocating for that. More on a long term, I do think very much that we need to reevaluate our eviction process, and we need to reevaluate our tenant landlord laws. Speaker Voss and his colleagues over on the right-hand side of the aisle own an awful lot of property, and they are the ones that have stripped away rights from our renters over the last few legislative sessions. And no landlord, no legislator should be in our government changing laws to benefit themselves and their bottom line. So making sure that we are investing in and taking care of and reinstilling our tenant laws is something that's really important also.
Thank you very much. In the sort of similar thread, a lot of people have been losing their health insurance since it's so heavily tied to their jobs in this pandemic, which is just awful. So the question is, will you fight for a single-payer healthcare system at the state level? And would you support a federal single-payer healthcare system?
Absolutely. That one's an easy one. I don't know that I need to talk about it much more than 100%. I already have. I'm on the record of it, and I will continue doing that. Healthcare is a human right. And I would go farther to say that it's not just physical health care. We need to make sure that we're including dental care and mental health care, comprehensive health care for everybody and their families.
Oh, yeah.
Will you pass workers' rights laws helping those who are forced to return to work, but who will risk infection from COVID-19? And absent the equivalent of a single-payer system, will you push the state to guarantee medical coverage through Badger Care for those affected in this way?
Absolutely. So this was one thing that, we had one legislative day since COVID here in the state of Wisconsin, where the vast majority of us were on Zoom. And there were a few people in the Capitol building as we addressed one big bill, as opposed to being able to have global conversations about COVID and what it is that we need to be doing to support Wisconsin. I've been, outspoken, and many people in my caucus have been outspoken about the fact that we need to be taking care of the folks that are on the front lines. If there is a daycare worker who is working at a daycare and is getting paid, $9 an hour to take care of frontline workers' children, and then someone in the daycare tests positive and they have to shut down that daycare for the safety of everyone there, that person right now isn't going to be able to collect wages unless their employer has figured out a way that they're going to be able to cover that. And that, quite frankly, is egregious. Additionally, there were some striking provisions in the legislation that took away protections from our frontline firefighters, paramedics, and police officers. And to me, you know, they do have many more protections than a lot of our frontline workers. But the fact that we even took away protections that were promised to them in the first pieces of legislation is absolutely terrible. We need to be doing more to protect our workers, whether they're public sector workers or private sector workers, during COVID. And that would be family leave. You know, your kid gets sick, your parent gets sick, you need to be able to take care of them. That would be if you're sick and you are afraid to tell your boss that you're sick and you keep going to work hoping that you don't have symptoms, but you're spreading to other people. The ability to get tested adequately. I have a neighbor who is a nurse at a local hospital and her baby got a fever. And, you know, she does triage. So she sees people all of the time that, you know, potentially have COVID. And her answer was to go through the line at Alliant. And that day it was over 4 hours and she had a shift and she had kids to take care of. She didn't have 4 hours to sit in her car. She's a frontline worker. She shouldn't have had to even think that she was going to have to sit in her car at the Alliant Energy Center. I am glad that we have that, but clearly that's an example of how we don't have enough testing. Additionally, Badger Care should have been expanded years ago here in the state of Wisconsin. And this is just another example, another illustration of why it is that we should have done it and why it is that we're going to continue advocating and working very hard to make sure that healthcare does get expanded in the state of Wisconsin. We do have real donut holes and people falling through the cracks, not having access to what it is that they need.
Thank you. So the next question is kind of like a lightning round. So you can just indicate your support, yes or no, for each of the individual proposals here. So do you support the propositions outlined in Campaign Zero, which includes ending broken windows policing?
Yes.
More community oversight of the police?
Yes.
Limiting the use of force?
Yes.
Independent investigation and prosecution of officers?
Yes.
More community representation in those investigations?
Yes.
More body cams such filming the police?
Yep.
An increased amount of training?
Yep.
Ending for-profit policing?
Yep.
And then finally, demilitarization?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
All right, so would you support the increasing, leveling, decreasing, or the eliminating of funding for the police?
All right, so this is a toughie one. You know, I want to make sure that I answer it carefully. So I'm going to start by saying decreasing. And really, it's not as simple as just saying a word. So I hope that you guys will allow me to add some sentences and reasoning behind that.
Absolutely.
So in my opinion, it's not simply about removing funding from police and public safety programs. I believe very much that we need to be investing in ensuring that our hard-earned tax dollars are being used to support and invest and strengthen our communities and our people. And I believe that means providing comprehensive health care, robust mental health services, activities for our youth and our teens, prenatal programs, and programs that, you know, the Head Start programs that are in our communities for families, access to birth control and abortion, affordable childcare, fully funded public schools, a healthy environment where kids can go outside and play, and serious action to address gun violence and more. So where it is that we spend our money, you know, if we're going to put it in a bucket that's called police, or if we're going to put it in a bucket that calls human services, one of my concerns is that we have too many silos when we're talking about how it is that we take care of ourselves in our communities. And we could rename our bucket that's called police into community safety programming. And then I would say, well, we should be increasing funding there. But maybe we have people there that act in the same capacity to make sure that our communities are safe, and that if you need to call someone because your house is being broken into, that's the organization or the people that you call to. I tend to think that, you know, this is one of those examples that we need to be committed to becoming uncomfortable and having conversations that are not easy. And we need to make sure that we are bringing people to the table who have traditionally not been at the table in order to have these conversations and figure out what it's going to look like. Some of this work needs to happen really quickly, and we're seeing some benefits of that quick work right now through the Black Lives Matter movement. but some of it is going to take a while. I am inherently not a very patient human being. You can ask my 4 kids that. They will explain to you that I am not very patient. But there are some times when policy making and re-evaluating how it is that we do things is vital, that patience is vital. And my kids and serving in government has taught me the importance of those things. The system is absolutely broken. I will admit to that. We need real change, and we need real change now. And I am committed to creating that change. We need to find the people that need to be at the table that currently aren't there. We need to lift those people up, and we need to work with them. And some of those people, quite frankly, are working in our police departments. They are there. And the same reason why it is that I ran for office the very first time. I felt like government was broken. It wasn't representing the people adequately. They weren't hearing voices like mine. And I decided, rather than just deciding that government was terrible and broken, that I was going to roll up my sleeves and I was going to run for office, that I wanted to help make it be better. And there are a lot of people that have decided to be servicing our community through the police departments with that same mission. And those same values. And I think it's really important that we realize and recognize that that is the case also. We need to shine light on what it is that's going on, and we're going to get into some of these questions later. So I feel like maybe I'll stop talking here. But again, it feels a little bit oversimplified to say increasing, decreasing, leveling up, eliminating. I think we need to figure out how it is that we're going to move the money around, and we need to lift up the voices that aren't heard and that need to be heard.
This next question is somber. A police officer in your jurisdiction has been filmed killing someone they have stopped or arrested. How would you respond?
So sadly, this is a true story, right? I mean, I think that probably most of us can think of examples that this has happened in a community that we either live in or lived in or have a family member that lives in. And I realize that as an elected official, it is my job to stand up and to be there to support my community. And I think a big part of my responsibility in a situation like that, a terrible situation like that, is to make sure that the community that it happens in, so city, county, town, village, state, whatever jurisdiction department needs to step up, and they need to hold their officer accountable, and they need to do it in a transparent way. And we are currently not doing that in a transparent way. I don't know anywhere in our nation, quite frankly. I think also that we need to be doing more evaluations of our police departments and the practices that have led to this type of behavior. There's history out there, and police weren't always as militant as they are now. There was a turning of the tides that brought us here. What is that history? How is it that we can learn from that and we can make corrections? I think it's really amazing that Attorney General Josh Kaul has been really outspoken on the fact that we have a need in Wisconsin to be doing this. And he is the top cop in the state. And that is really brave. And he has taken some bold stances on a number of different issues, and I was really pleased to see him take a stance on this. As far as community supports, I've been there. I've held families, literally sobbing parents in my arms when their children have died from gun violence. It's not easy. Some families don't want that. Some families want space, and then it's a matter of honoring and knowing what it is that community and that family needs. But at the end of the day, how it is that we support the family is really important also.
So you've listed quite a few propositions regarding your stances on policing. Please list any other propositions regarding policing that you will fight for.
So I have a number of different bullet points here. My caucus has put out a number of policies that I am supportive of. Some of them have been put out over a year ago, and some of them were put out more recently with my colleagues in the Black Caucus. Additionally, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes and Governor Evers have put out a number of different policies. We need to be having de-escalation training within our police forces. We need to be making sure that we are hiring more people, I didn't list this one, who have social work and mental health backgrounds. We need to be, I believe, hiring more people from the communities with which they would be working in. Right now in Madison, you can't be a police officer if you have a criminal record. Well, just because someone made a mistake 5 or 10 years ago doesn't mean that they wouldn't be the most amazing police officer for that community. We should not be defined by the worst mistake that we make. It doesn't mean that everyone that has made a terrible mistake is the right person to be a police officer either. But removing barriers like that seem objective or subjective, I think is really important. We need to be supporting policies to demilitarize our police, increasing transparency and oversight, investing in our communities, wages, housing, mental health, substance abuse, treatment, et cetera. We've talked a lot about those human services, making sure that single families, as well as families in distress and in stressful situations, do know that there are resources out there. A single mom of 4 boys, it's not always easy. You know, I have 3 children that are now taller than me, and they are bigger than me. And I have amazing resources available to me, and you know, I am tenacious and fighting for them. But not everyone has that, and I'm also very privileged to be a white woman. Additionally, I believe that we need to invest in peace officers or ambassadors in our communities, maybe a mid-level resource person that's just available, that's there, that works more in a social work role.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So the next question is a little bit more of personal history. So who did you support in the Democratic Party presidential primary this year, and why?
So I didn't publicly support a candidate this cycle because of when Senator Miller announced that he wasn't going to be running, and I was rolling up my sleeves, deciding if I was going to run for office. And I had a number of personal things going on in my life as well. And I just, you know, that I don't know if you all know this analogy, but in my family, you have a teacup, and you can only pour so much water in it before the water goes over the edge. The water was spilling over the edge in my life at that point in time. But personally, I was cheering on and supporting both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Both of my sons who are old enough to vote are fierce Bernie Sanders supporters, and he was actually the first person 4 years ago that they went out and campaigned for that wasn't their mom, all on their own. And when they campaigned for me, I've always had to prod them and beg them to. So I saw that as pretty cool and interesting. I believe both of them are unapologetic and bold and really thoughtful in the policy making that they make. And they also have lots of experience and connections with people in their community. So a lot of what it is that I am running on, I believe that they exhibit standing up for the working people of our country. So at the end of the day, I will also say I was super excited at the possibility of having a female candidate at the top of the ticket. It has been far too long for us as a nation to have someone. And there was a picture early on in the presidential campaign cycle that I believe had 5 or 6 women were running for president, sitting around in a room waiting for a debate. And they were a rainbow of people, not only in the values that they hold, but who it is that they are, what they represent, and where they come from. And to me, that picture alone breaks so many barriers for young girls and women. And I very much hope that I am providing an example like that to young people in my community. And I was told I shouldn't, you know, you're serving in the assembly. You should stay there. You know, that's the easy road. And I've never done anything because it's easy. I've done it because that's where my heart tells me to go and because it's right. And I'm excited to be running for Senate, but it's also terrifying to have walked away from the assembly, something that I love so very much.
Thank you. Switching gears, what is your analysis of the Evers administration and the state legislature's handling of the COVID-19 crisis in Wisconsin, including its handling of the process leading up to the April 7th election?
Yeah, you know, I think about how quickly everything happened. I was at a coffee shop on a Wednesday having a listening session for my Senate race. And on Thursday, I told my staff at the Capitol to call the Technical Service Bureau and figure out how to log on at home and do their work there. And I haven't been back to the Capitol except for a brief amount of time, kind of sneaking in and out to check mail and, you know, check the phones and, you know, not be there when my staff was there. This pandemic has been really fast moving, and every day it kind of throws another wrench at us. I really applaud the thoughtful work that Governor Evers and his administration took early on. He brought a lot of people together, which isn't always easy. It's a lot easier to decide for yourself, but he had emergency management, as well as department secretaries, doctors, frontline workers, and very senior staff trying to figure out what it is that we needed to be doing. Governor Evers believes in science, and he surrounds himself with people who believe in science. I believe that the safer at home order was the right thing to do. And I think that overwhelmingly people, regardless of party affiliation, who they vote for president or governor, believed that the safer at home order was the right thing to do. And that shutting down and social distancing was really hard, but it saved lives. And we were not getting fair science-based knowledge from our federal government. There was no leadership there. And there were a number of different Midwestern governors that I think also pooled their resources across borders to support one another and move forward. So despite the fact that our Republican colleagues sued Governor Evers in my name, they said it was the whole legislature that was suing, and I was never asked if I wanted to be party of that lawsuit. I continue to be impressed with what it is that the governor and Secretary Designee Palm are doing, and all the other people at the table. I wish that we could be doing more. Quite frankly, I think we should be having a mandatory mask ban, mandatorily wearing masks on the outside of our homes. I think we should be back to safer at home. Unless we need to be going out for social distancing. I was out for a ride today with my kids in the car. Sometimes it's important to get out, and I drove by a tavern, and there had to have been 200 people standing in a parking lot, surrounded by motorcycles, holding beer with no masks. This was not in Dane County. It was frightening. Normally we would see something like that on the 4th of July weekend, and we would be celebrating it. So at the end of the day, I find it really egregious what the GOP has done. The GOP legislature has done to the state of Wisconsin. People are dying because they're playing COVID roulette with their lives. That happened when it came to voting, and it's happening when it comes to going back to work. And it's happening, I'm afraid of what's going to happen when it's time for kids to go back to school. We need to be doing more. Politics should not play into public health. And that's as I mentioned, one of the important things that I'm talking about in my campaign is honoring and investing in public health. This pandemic is scary. And the fact that our legislature has only met one time and feels that they've done their work in order to address the concerns that we're facing, I think that's very upsetting also. We have an opportunity this year to change the makeup of our legislature. I think a lot of people are talking about preventing Voss from gaining his 3 seats and being able to take the veto away from the governor. But in my heart and my soul, I very much believe we have an opportunity to flip things around in Wisconsin and change what the faces of our government looks like. So yes, I'm going to prevent Robin Voss from getting that veto power, but I am also going to work like hell, not only in my own campaign, but in campaigns for other people across Wisconsin, so that we can ensure that people do get health care and housing and sick leave, and that our schools are funded and their environment is there in decades from now, and that kids know that when they believe and dream that they can achieve those dreams and beliefs. And right now they're stuck at home. They don't have that ability.
Thank you. Switching gears again, are you supportive of the BDS, which is the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement?
Absolutely. I very much believe that Palestinians and all people are entitled to human rights, and I believe very much that we need to be enforcing that. I don't think that we should have to choose between Israelis and Palestinians.
All right. Do you believe that protesting is a form of speech, and therefore the right to do so, including BDS and the anti-pipeline movements, should not be punished?
I should have worn my freedom of speech t-shirt. It's a fundamental right. And I have stood on the front lines. I have a rich personal history in protecting and standing up for free speech. my kids made a sign. My two older boys were about 10 and 8, and they made a sign during Act 10 and held it in the Capitol building on the first floor that said solidarity. They actually did not fight with each other and drew a sign. And we went down to the Capitol building and they hung it. And I was detained by the Capitol Police and cited because my kids held a sign in the Capitol building that said solidarity. As there were people walking all over the building holding other signs. You know, there have been people on the Capitol building recently saying things that I don't agree with, but the fact that they can safely do that, I think is very important. Freedom of speech is part of what our democracy and what our country has been built on.
I have a follow-up question. When you're talking with the people who have been around the Capitol saying things you don't agree with, who are those people?
The COVID deniers.
Okay.
I don't agree with the fact that they had a guillotine at the Capitol, right? Like that was upsetting to me. And it was confusing to me why they had anti-abortion signs at a COVID rally. That was confusing to me, but it is also their right to be there. As long as, you know, they're not, you know, they weren't hurting anyone. It's their freedom of speech.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Number 15, I'm going to sort of move into a little bit more technical questions about the campaign. So can you list any unions that have endorsed you in this race, and which labor endorsements are you actively seeking?
So I've been endorsed by WEAC and the Professional Firefighters Local 311, SCIU, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, the Building and Trades, UAW, the Iron Workers, and IBEW Local 159. I have reached out and I'm hoping to receive the endorsements of MTI, the AFL-CIO, Smart Local 18, the Carpenters, Teamsters, AFSCME, and then a few non-union endorsers that matter to me, Planned Parenthood and the Conservation Voters.
Awesome.
All right. All right, this next question is regarding fundraising, and it's a series of questions which I will ask all of and then have you respond to. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay. How much money have you raised for this race to date? Who are your top 3 donors? What percentage of your total is from these top donors? How much of it is strictly from small individual donors of less than $50? And if this is your first, and given that this is not your first election, please answer these questions regarding your last election as well.
All right, so I've raised about $40,000 since announcing my candidacy in January, and this has been largely raised by small grassroots donors that live in my district. The top 3 donors, which is about 6% of that, is SCIU, WEAC, and the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, so it's PAC money that came from these unions. 30% of my campaign contributions are from individual donors of $50 or less, but overall my campaign's average contribution is about $72.11 if he wants to exacts. My campaign manager is very good at those exacts. As far as my last election, I did not have opposition in the last election, and I had a different campaign manager, so the data collecting and the time frame that we had here, we weren't able to go back and put that all in. But I didn't have a contested race at that point.
Thank you very much. Number 17, you mentioned this a little bit before, but do you support the legalization of recreational cannabis, including the expungement of all previous cannabis-related charges and release of all those currently serving time for such charges?
Well, seeing that I drafted that bill, AB 220, I know it will. I fully support it. And I very much believe that the most dangerous thing about cannabis in Wisconsin is that it remains illegal. It's a very multifaceted topic. I believe that there are financial impacts to the state of Wisconsin. I believe there are social justice impacts to the state of Wisconsin, and I believe that there are economic impacts to the state of Wisconsin, among many. The bill that most recent version of the bill that I introduced does have expungement of records for nonviolent cannabis-related offenses. It allows people that are currently sitting in our jails and prisons for nonviolent marijuana-related offenses to be able to petition for release. It allows people who have been cited or have a record of a cannabis-related offense to actually be able to enter into the industry. In many states, they do not allow for that to be able to happen. I see this very much as a social justice issue in Wisconsin. The usage of cannabis is nearly equal between people of color and white people, but depending on what county you're in, it's 1 to 4 to 1 to 7 times more likely that if you're a Black man, you're going to be arrested for simple possession of cannabis. We absolutely need to be doing this better. And this is a huge issue that I have been working very hard on for about 7 years, and we're seeing the support grow. And I look forward to it becoming bipartisan support. Actually, I should say the only area it's not bipartisan is in the Capitol building. Out across the streets in Wisconsin, this is not partisan, but unfortunately, Republican leadership has made it partisan in our Capitol building.
And then lastly, do you have paid staff or consultants working on your campaign? And if so, what percentage of your campaign funding goes to paid staff or consultants?
So I do have 2 paid staff members on my campaign, and I have a multitude of amazing grassroots volunteers on my campaign as well. Really, I call it Team Melissa. We are all in this together, and I am the one that has the opportunity to put my name on the ballot, but very much in the same way that I have served as an assembly person. It's about bringing people together and making space. And rising up the voices of the amazing folks within this district. I very much believe in the importance of paying a living wage. And because of that, my campaign staff's wages make up about 14% of my funding at this point in time. Additionally, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's super important to do outreach in different ways. I love knocking on doors. Even as an off-the-charts introvert someone came up and knocked on my door, I wouldn't necessarily be answering it. I love going out and meeting people in my community. I have met amazing heroes, people with such powerful stories as I've knocked on doors. And I am missing that, really, I'm missing it a lot. But because of the change in dynamic, because of COVID, my campaign is really focusing a lot on digital. And we have hired a digital firm called Run the World Digital, which is a locally based women's run organization here based in Madison, Wisconsin, and they're helping me with my digital efforts. I did send you 2 of the ads that we're running on Facebook currently, but I'm going to ask that those aren't shared out to the world. People can go to Facebook if they want to see them. They're accessible there. I just thought it might be helpful for you all. So they are getting about 3% of my campaign funding at this point, and we're hoping to be able to put a little bit more money into digital as well. For print and mail, I've been working with local union businesses. For my yard signs and t-shirts, I have worked with Budget Signs. And for my mailing and any printing flyers and such, I'm working with Wells Print and Digital, another union shop in town. The remaining amount of my funds, which is a little over 80%, I believe about 83% of the funds, is going directly into voter engagement efforts. And I think it is vital and unfortunate that I can't be reaching people at their doors, but we're doing everything that we can through phones and mailboxes and computers to be able to engage with them. And my personal cell phone number and email addresses are out there. And, you know, I'm spending an awful lot of time and talking to people and answering questions that way.
All right, thank you so much, Melissa, for being here and doing this interview with us. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. I really appreciate being able to spend some time with you. Stay cool and healthy.
Hell yeah. Thank you.